This past Saturday was a huge day for the Cornhusker faithful, as they finally got to see some on-field product of Matt Rhule and his coaching staff. In the first 168 days of the Matt Rhule era, not much was able to be seen. There were just whispers, rumors, spring practice reports, recruiting, utilizing the portal, but nothing on the field. And spring games are what they are. They have some implications. I think it is good and healthy to watch them if you want to be an aware and in-depth college football fan and not just a casual. But at the same time, they are just practices. They don't determine that a team is going to win the national title or win their conference or many of these things that matter a million times more than a spring game, things that will be determined in the fall. So don't put all your eggs in the basket that is the spring game. You got to split them out between practices, between the spring game, between just insider reports of things that myself, you, and 99% of people who enjoy college football don't have access to, and so on, so forth. And even that stuff, things can go right for a team, and Nebraska fans know this. Just listen to half of Scott Frost's preseasons, whether it's his speeches, whether it's the reports regarding the team, whether it's the spring games themselves. I was very high on Nebraska in 2022. I thought they would win the West. ESPN's FPI predicted them to win the West in the preseason. They flunked. They went 4-8, somehow beat Iowa at the end of the year, but were dog crap in all of their other 11 games. It was a disaster. It was a debacle. I had them going, as many of you will famously remember, 10-2, had them at number 10, and they flunked. They were anything but a top 10 team. And this team, in my opinion, let's start off here, is anything but a top 10 team. Before I want to go further in the video, I also want to mention that Frank Solich, former Nebraska head coach, was honored. That was another thing that made this past Saturday important for Cornhusker Nation. Frank Solich coached from 1998 to 2003. He succeeded Tom Osborne. The locker room, I do believe, was named after him. He had one national title appearance in 2001. He had a 12-1 season in which the Cornhuskers won the Big 12 in 1999, and he had a 58-19 record with the Cornhuskers, and he was 33-15 in the Big 12 conference. He also he coached at Ohio for 15-16 years, and in total he had a career coaching record of 173-101, bringing Ohio to the MAC championship game several times and having a lot of success with the University of Ohio Bobcats. Anyway, just wanted to shoot that out there. But going back to this game, the spring game, and going back to the on-field product that will become the 2023 Nebraska football team, who will actually play for games that mean something and will play for wins and losses starting in September. This team also looks anything like a top 10 team, but they're not nearly as bad as, I don't think they're nearly as bad as the 2022 squad. Now, time will tell whether that's the case or not. We've seen Matt Rhule in his first season at both Temple and Baylor just do a scorched earth policy. Team looks like dog poop for the first year. And then in year 2, year 3, they're okay, maybe above average. Year 3 and 4 is when the breakthrough occurs. This was, of course, before the transfer portal, and Baylor and Temple have far fewer resources than Nebraska does. Though, in regards to team culture, I don't know where Nebraska stands in comparison to Baylor or Temple at the times that Matt Rhule came there. Nebraska's culture was pretty busted. Scott Frost, Mike Riley, I'd even say Bo Pelini, did a decent job at, wearing it down and chipping away at it. It was just the most noticeable under Riley and Scott Frost. Temple was always a terrible football program before Matt Rhule took it over, and Baylor was just getting over a huge, awful sexual assault scandal, which was terrible. Justice was done, and because of the lack of action taken by Baylor football, their program was in the gutter for a few years, and Matt Rhule had to clean up that mess. So all these things to say, Matt Rhule knows what it takes to rebuild a program. He's a big winner. The question is not if, in my opinion, it is when. And I heard Josh Pate say this in regards to Nebraska football just the other day. The question is not if, it is when. And I think the when for Nebraska is sooner than it was at Temple and Baylor. And the spring game showed that to me a little bit. Number one, the defense looked much better, much improved compared to any of Eric Chenander's units outside of the 2021 unit, which in retrospect, I have no clue how that unit existed under his leadership, but it did. This looks like a far improved defense. If Garrett Nelson decided to return and not go to the draft, this defense might have legitimate top 25, potentially higher potential, especially at the lines of scrimmage. I mean, MJ Sherman was the player of the game on defense, in my opinion. Nash, Hutchmacher, Ty Robinson, some others got pretty significant playing time, but MJ Sherman was constantly able to blow past blocks from the O-line, get penetration. He got some big hits, and to his credit, he's a really good player. Georgia recruit, nearly a 5-star when recruited by Georgia. He has that high ceiling potential, but also to, in some ways, not discrediting him, but just stating the obvious, the offensive line was not good. I think the offensive line will continue, for now, to be the main weakness of this offense. I mean, skill position, Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson and Heinrich Haarberg, that's one of the better quarterback rooms in the nation. That's a top 25 quarterback room with all three of those guys in there, in my opinion. Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson are both great athletes. Jeff Sims obviously being a phenomenal athlete, Casey Thompson being a far more polished passer. And we'll see come summer and fall camp when Casey Thompson is healthy what that competition looks like. We might not even hear a starter being named at all. Maybe Matt Rhule will just kind of name the starter when he takes the field in Nebraska's opening game on the road against Minnesota. Who knows? But Jeff Sims certainly looked the part, played the part. He had a rushing touchdown. He showed off his athleticism. All in all, Nebraska football in the spring game, the white team jumped to a 21-point first half lead, and they won 21-7. This was not an offense versus defense game. Both red and white had an offense and defense component to them. The white team was dominant. They scored the only offensive points of the game. The 7 points scored by red were a fumble recovery for 6, which to me looked like an incomplete pass. But again, it's a spring game. Officiating and all that stuff doesn't really matter. Timmy Bleekrode and special teams looked good. Bleekrode made a 49-yard field goal with the wind at his back. He hooked a 46-yard field goal against the wind. I think Nebraska's special teams unit will see strides. Last year they were actually decent, but the rest of the offense and defense were so garbage that you didn't even notice that, because unlike in 2021, where punting and kicking axed the team, it was everything but special teams that was axing the team in 2022. Overall, White had 18 first downs compared to Red's 8. White had 146 rushing yards compared to Red's 46. Both had under 200 yards passing, White having 154 passing yards, Red having 105 passing yards. Each team had thrown an interception. Each team altogether had 27 attempts, 13 completions, and 1 pick. So passing was not the strength here, but when you look at all the quarterbacks, in my opinion, outside of Casey Thompson, all of them are either balanced or more properly put, are more run quarterbacks, more athletic quarterbacks than they are passing quarterbacks. Logan Smothers, who entered the transfer portal, Heinrich Haarberg, Jeff Sims, those are more athlete quarterbacks. They look better running the football, in my opinion, than they do passing the football. Chubba Purdy, to me, seems pretty balanced. More of a run threat than Casey Thompson, not nearly as competent in passing. You could say he leans more run. Casey Thompson is the only quarterback who has a good reputation at passing the football. That's not to say Jeff Sims isn't a good player. He's an athlete, kind of like a Jalen Milroe quarterback, though not as good. Doesn't have the same top-end speed, same athleticism. He's, you could say Jalen Milroe's Jeff Sims 2.0, or that Jeff Sims is a lower edition of Jalen Milroe would be the best way to put it. In total, White had 300 yards of offense compared to Red's 151 yards. Red had a fumble recovery. Both White and Red had an interception. Red punted twice. In total, there were 4 fumbles by both sides. Red lost all 4. White only lost 2. Defense was dominant. It was totally dominant in this game. Again, there was an offense that held the Cornhusker name for the entire game, and only 28 total points were scored. Only 21 of those were offensive points, and a lot of those scores were off of turnovers, were fumble recoveries inside opponent territory. So the defense, to me, showed out. Very much improved, in my opinion. And Jeff Sims was able to stand out Saturday, and I could see him starting this fall. In fact, you look at ourlads.com, and he is listed currently as the starter. Now, I do think Casey Thompson will have something to say about that. I think Casey Thompson gives Nebraska its best chance to win. And I say this because Casey Thompson and Jeff Sims didn't have a good offensive line behind Georgia Tech. But if you want to have a run-first quarterback, he's either got to be completely magical or you need to give him a good supporting cast to work with. And I don't know if Nebraska has that supporting cast yet. Billy Kemp at wide receiver, he looked good at the slot position. Xavier Betts and Marcus Washington are projected to be the other starters at Z and X position for wide receiver. I think that Nebraska has a very underrated wide receiver room, especially with Xavier Betts back, and if he can stay disciplined, stay on top of his game, he will evolve into a dangerous wide receiver. Billy Kemp played for Baylor when Matt Rhule was there, and then Marcus Washington transferred in from Texas after 2021 along with Casey Thompson, and he had a pretty solid season in 2022. Tight end, Nate Borkacher, he had a nice catch. Him and Thomas Fidone saw action. I don't remember seeing Eric Gilbert at all, and he's currently listed as the number 3 player at tight end. So Eric Gilbert, who knows if he'll ever see the field again, but for now it's just kind of safe to assume that he'll be another body. And if Fidone can stay healthy, that's amazing. And Borkacher, he for now looks like the most proven option. And then at offensive line, Ben Scott, incoming transfer, he's projected to be the starting center, but there's tons of questions around the offensive line. It looked like the weakest position on the field once again. Constant pressure. Heinrich Haarberg, he had some of his highs, but there were other moments where he had a low, like after he didn't handle himself in the pocket well, one snap, and he got pressured. He tried to make something out of nothing, and he got sacked, and he put his team in a 4th and 26, and I think that's when Timmy Bleekrode had his second attempt at a field goal and missed. I do like Heinrich Haarberg, though. I think him and Jeff Sims had the best performances, in my opinion. He looked good. He definitely is a high-ceiling kind of player. I like his speed, and shiftiness, really. And trench play, to go back to offensive line, defensive line comparisons, again, like I already said, the defensive line was heavily favored, even though it's a 3-3-5. the 5-man offensive line stood no chance against the 3-man defensive line. And more often than not, several linebackers came forward to help, but I noticed something. And this goes to show either how terrible Nebraska's O-line is or how good their D-line is. It's probably a mix of both, but definitely favoring the D-line. Many times when Tony White called blitzes and, 5, 6 guys came forward against Nebraska's 5-man offensive line, mostly on run plays. The guys who were shooting through the gaps in the O-line were not the linebackers. They were the defensive linemen. The defensive linemen were the ones overpowering the O-line. The linebackers just kind of looked like supporting casts, like they were going to maybe plug holes, but the D-line was actually the ones that, got in there and got the penetration, whether it was through the tackle, whether it was through the guard. There were several times where they got, whether it was Gabe Ervin or Anthony Grant, they just got him in the backfield and hit him hard. So this D-line, this was something that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting Nebraska's defensive line to be one of the most forsaken things in the Big Ten this season. They didn't have any depth. They didn't have any really star player outside of maybe Ty Robinson, but definitely MJ Sherman. And combining that with a linebacker room that, has just been lackluster and disappointing and unable to live up to the hype for the past 2 seasons, I just didn't expect the defense to come out and do what it did. And the offense is built much better than the defense is. Much better. I mean, you have a great quarterback room. You have a great wide receiver room. If Eric Gilbert can get his act together and live up to his talent, and if Thomas Fedone can stay healthy, that's a good tight end room. And Anthony Grant, Ramir Johnson, Gabe Ervin Jr., that is a great running back room. Anthony Grant nearly rushed for 1,000 yards last year with absolutely no supporting cast. The problem is the offensive line. That's the only problem on offense for Nebraska. You gave them Michigan's offensive line, Nebraska's offense would do horrific things. And they would have done horrific things last season if they had a better play caller. I don't know what happened with Mark Whipple, but he was not good in 2022. If they had a better play caller and an offensive line at an elite level, that offense would have done unholy things to about any defense in the country. And I think it will be the same this year with Marcus Satterfield at the helm calling plays on offense. But the defense is what surprised me. And defensive back, along with D-line, I think will be a strength of this team. Linebacker, you got Luke Reimer and Nick Heinrich, who are back again. I thought that they were going to have huge breakout 2022 seasons, but they didn't. Chief Borders, Luke Reimer, and Nick Heinrich are currently the projected starting linebackers. It's a 3-3-5, which is different than the defenses that Eric Chenander and, forgive me for saying his name, Bob Diaco, ran before Scott Frost came and it was Mike Riley's last season. This is a different kind of defense. Wisconsin is also running a 3-3-5 or even a 2-4-5 since they have an incredibly deep linebacker room. So the Big Ten West is modernizing, and Wisconsin and Nebraska are leading the pack there with, bringing in defenses that aren't just 4-3 or 3-4. Iowa pretty much runs a 4-2-5 with rotations, but the defense is the only modern thing about the Hawkeyes. The offense very well offsets that. But you look at defense, and I just wasn't expecting this, and I think it's very encouraging. The offense showed that the O-line's a little worse than I anticipated it was. I mean, part of me after that spring game wonders if retaining Donovan Raiola as the offensive line coach was mainly a recruiting gig. But I don't know, like a recruiting gig for Dylan Raiola. But who knows? By the way, he wasn't at the spring game, so I don't know what's up with that. But who knows if it's a big deal. The defense showed out. They overpowered the offensive line. Secondary looked, I would say, okay, above average. There's still improvement that needs to be done there, obviously. But with Marquise Buford, Miles Farmer, Malcolm Hartzog, Quinton Newsome, Isaac Gifford, Nebraska's returning plenty of starters, and all of those players got playing time last year. They're returning guys and will have experience at secondary. And I think that Miles Farmer and Marcus Buford, Quinton Newsome, all of those guys have had talent, and they have had their high moments as compared to the linebacker room, which has just been, if we're honest, a disaster for the past few seasons. So Tony White is obviously doing his job. Marcus Satterfield is doing his job. And Casey Thompson, him being healthy, will change a lot of this offense as well, as the passing game is going to be a lot more unlocked and in rhythm, either if Thompson starts or if Jeff Sims progresses enough in the passing game to become a proficient passer. I still have concerns at the linebacker and tight end rooms. Tight end just for overall health, and Eric Gilbert has been a question mark since day one of his college career. I'm not betting on him doing much of anything this season, and I don't think Husker fans should either. But if he does do something, that's fantastic. White beat red 21-7, and while I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid or telling you, unlike last year, that Nebraska is this magical team that will blow out multiple opponents, win the Big Ten West, compete for a Big Ten title and potentially a New Year's Six bowl bid or a higher end bowl bid, it's not New Year's Six. What I am here to tell you is I think that Matt Rhule is building something long term. I think this team will go bowling in 2023. They will break that streak. And I think that this defense will rebound from last year's just disaster. And I think the offense will improve as well. Overall, this will be a better team than the 2022 team, and it will be the first time since 2016 that Nebraska goes bowling. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment your thoughts on Nebraska's spring game down below. And if you're listening via Spotify, make sure to follow the channel. Have a great day, guys. I'll see you around. Bye.